Okay, so this video, is how to find your core material evidence and build your fraud case. Okay, now I have given out the textbook at this point. There is a lot of information out there, but I wanted to go ahead and go through a video. How to find your core material evidence and build your fraud case. If you're watching this, you probably have boxes of documents, years of court records, screenshots, emails, CPS report, medical files, and you're probably exhausted. You have lived through legal abuse, you have lived through like coercive control and a system that made you feel completely powerless. So today I'm going to teach you how to start from zero, okay? How to take all that evidence and find the core material facts that form the foundation of our fraud on the court complaint, okay? And we're going to do it in a way that protects your mind, your time, and your sanity. That would be the single solitary reason, by the way, that I asked you for two forms of a timeline. And hopefully you've already done that. The narrative timeline from the beginning the fraud started, which could mean before the court, by the way. So if you had somebody who was involved in it with the court officials, we can add them as a defendant to the case. Just saying, all right, even if they're a private party. So you had the narrative timeline and you have the outline timeline. And now we're going to be looking at our core evidence based on that timeline. Your core material evidence, you're going to find your most severe pieces of things that were done to you, okay? And we're going to build the fraud case based on that. Going back to the rule of threes and the video that I did on that. Each one of these cases is so complex that if we put everything in these cases, a federal judge is not going to listen to the case. Okay, they're not going to read the complaint because it's too extensive. So, and even though that doesn't feel good, what I want you to understand is that when we do this way, if the judge, number one, needs any more information, then he's going to ask for it. He or she's going to ask for it in the actual federal court moment. When the damages moment comes, we're going to write in our complaints or whatever this court deems proper, okay, for justice, all right? So that is to say, even though we're only going to be working on specific, most severe material facts, the entire case is going to become relevant at another time. We just need to be able to get the judge to actually look at the case instead of just saying, oh my gosh, this is 150 pages and throwing it away and saying, nah, never mind, okay? So anyway, so step one, start with the harm, not the paper. So looking back at your timeline, right, your narrative timeline. When people are traumatized, they start by digging through documents, right? And that's backwards, all right? So we're going to start the other way, and we're going to start with the harm. So what is the worst thing? That's what you need to ask yourself first. What is the worst thing that happened because of this court's actions against you? Okay? What decision destroyed your life, your safety, or your children's well-being, right? What outcome would have been different if the truth had been before the judge the way it was supposed to be? So, for example, I lost custody because of a false drug test. I've been hearing that a lot. CPS removed my child based on fabricated abuse allegations. I also hear that a lot. The court denied visitation because the GAL concealed evidence. Okay, so you get the point. You find the worst thing that happened because of the court's actions, and this becomes your anchor. It is your core material fact. Okay, that is the number one core material fact that begins your case. All right, so step two, build a simple chronological timeline. And since we've already done this, this should be actually quite easy. Now that you know the harm, the most harmful fact, the anchor fact, okay, you build a timeline, not a legal brief or a narrative, just a list of dates. Why? Because trauma scrambles memory. You know this. Timelines restore clarity. Your timeline has three parts. Before the fraud, what was happening? This is a new timeline, a little sub-timeline. What was going on before the fraud? How was your life? because we want the judge to know at a later time what the alteration of your life meant, okay? So we want to know, like, okay, I'll give you an example. My children and I was a single mom, right? My children and I, they had great grades. None of them were on any kind of drugs. They had great relationships with the Lord. We had absolutely great routines where they had friends, they loved their school, etc. Life was good, okay? And we need to present that part as well in this, just so you know, in the timeline, so that we can let the judge know this is why the fraud affected me so bad. So anyway, during the fraud, what officer of the court said or filed or whatever, you know, so what is the material facts, right? And then after the fraud, how did that outcome change your life into something different? This timeline becomes the map you will use to locate the core material facts. All right. Step 3. Identify what the officer of the court, aka the CPS worker, opposing counsel, CPS's attorney, doesn't matter who it is, what was told to the judge. Fraud on the court is not about every lie in your case. It is about what the judge on the whole picture was made to believe. So, for example, attorney statements, GAL statements, CPS attorney statements, evaluator reports used as court evidence, filings, declarations, testimony, recommendations, etc. highlight every factual claim that they made that was false. She failed the drug test. He refused visitation. The child disclosed abuse, especially when they say that and it's not actually true. Every time they misrepresent what the child has said against their parent, like that is absolutely a material fact in your fraud case. Document it. Were there no prior reports, or do you have unsubstantiated abuse allegations and reports from CPS that occurred before they removed your children illegally? So, anyway, these claims are the raw material you will compare against your evidence. Step 4, compare their claims to what evidence you have that those claims are false. So, for example, withholding exculpatory evidence. That's a big part of the fraud in these cases a lot of times. They withhold the evidence. They'll say, mother is uncooperative or combative or whatever, non-compliant. Father is non-compliant, right? Mother is not making proper progress toward her goals, so reunification is not an option. Like, they'll say that, okay. But then at the same time, you have the parenting classes proof, you have all the assessments that show that you needed nothing, you have everything in place, so you need to be able to compare what they said and have the evidence for federal court later on that what they were saying wasn't true. Okay, so, example, the attorney says you tested positive for drug use. Okay, fine. But you have the lab records that show you didn't. That's your material evidence, okay? The GAL says that you have multiple hotline reports of abuse allegations. But you can prove, because you have the records, the CPS records, that there was nothing against you until this particular moment. Like, every single bit of that. Okay, for example, CPS says the child is safe in their care, but you have evidence that in their care your child is then failing, getting hurt, getting molested, etc. Okay? So where the officer of the court statement and the hard records collide, you have found a material contradiction, and that becomes your core material evidence. So, step 5, test each contradiction for materiality, because not every contradiction is fraud, only the ones that change the outcome. So, if the judge had known the truth instead of a lie, would the decision have been different? That is how you decide whether or not each of these is material to your case or not. One more time, we have to take the biggest core material pieces of fraud, okay, in threes if possible. That way we can give the immaterial evidence around those things to create the whole picture if we need to. But that way it's not so overwhelming that the judge refuses to look at it. Okay, now, examples of material facts. A false drug test used to remove children. A fabricated, abuse allegation used to deny custody, okay? A concealed CPS report that supported your safety concerns about your children in their care, okay? Misquoted psychological evaluation used to label you as unstable, okay? Those are all core material facts. All right. So, step 6, choose the most severe law violations. Now you have a list of material contradictions, but your fraud case must be built around the most severe violations, not every wrong thing that happened. Okay? Choose the ones that involve intentional deception, were committed by an officer of the court, directly cause the harm you identify, especially in the damage section, can be proven with clear and convincing evidence. These become your core material facts. Okay? Example, the attorney knowingly submitted a falsified drug test. That becomes the language. Okay? When you identify your core material facts and evidence, that becomes your language. All right? The attorney knowingly submitted a falsified drug test. That is the language that we will then place in the federal complaint. The GAL intentionally concealed exculpatory evidence. Or here's another good one. The GAL in most states is supposed to be like, kind of a there for the child, right? And in order for that person to have any kind of an idea of what is best for the child, then she's probably going to need to meet the parents, okay? And so if you have proof that you've never even met the GL, with the exception of when you're in court, then that is a material evidence that there was no concern about the safety and well-being of your child because they didn't even investigate, right? That's their job. Anyway, CPS fabricated abuse allegations to justify removal. That's a big one. That's a big one. That's actually one of the most common patterns I see, and that needs to be the language based on your core evidence and your material core evidence and your material facts. That needs to be the language that we place in the complaint. CPS fabricated abuse allegations to justify removal. Okay? These are the pillars of your fraud complaint. Step 7. Build the fraud case around each core material fact. Now you create what I call a fraud packet for each core fact. Each packet contains the core material fact, one sentence. On blah 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 date, the GAL knowingly concealed a CPS report showing the child was safe. Okay? Meaning safe with you, the parent. Okay? B, the timeline snippet. 3 to 5 bullet points kind of explain the process there. The statement, the actual direct statement that the GAL made in court, or whatever proof you have, like quote the lie or the misrepresentation. D, the contradictory evidence. You need to attach the certified record, transcript, or document, all right, in that particular, I would literally take a blank piece of paper for each one of these core material facts, and I would write the one sentence, the GAL, again, we're using this as an example, knowingly concealed a CPS report showing the child was safe. The GAL intentionally concealed an unsubstantiated report against me. Okay, so put that on your blank paper. Then 3 to 5 bullet points showing the sequence of events and how it took place, when she presented it, who she presented it to, what the exact statement was she used, and then attach a copy of the record, transcript, document, whatever you have that shows that, okay? So, next is the materiality explanation. You need to write on that same blank piece of paper you started with, one paragraph explaining how this changed the outcome of your case. For example, if the GAL had presented prior unsubstantiated reports of abuse, the judge would know that I am not a danger to my children. Okay, so there you go. The harm, right under that, show the real world impact to you of the harm that was caused by that material fact. So, because the GAL made this statement to the judge, lied, withheld exculpatory evidence, whatever it is, because this happened, the impact on me was custody loss, CPS removal of my children, financial harm, trauma, etc., whatever it is, okay? But just make sure that the harm is there in your last paragraph, because you need to be able to place this. This is how we're structuring our complaint. You need to be able to place these things later on into the fraud complaint in the paragraphs. So, step 8, protecting your mind while you work. This part matters. Trauma survivors often re-experience the abuse of this legal system, abuse of partners, abuse of whatever. Like, trauma survivors often re-experience the trauma, okay, when they're reviewing this evidence. So, I need you to work in short sessions with breaks. And when your mind, your heart, your body, whatever it is, you're overwhelmed, tells you to stop, then take a break. You can come back to it. But I need you to do this in a way where you can preserve yourself, because this is healthy, okay? This is healthy. You cannot heal until you absolutely go through this process, all right? But you have to do it in a way that you can handle. And I want everybody to remember that. This part matters. You are not weak. You are processing years of coercive control. Okay? You are building a case that exposes it. And this is where you're going to get your power back. Okay? You are not starting with chaos, as much as I know it feels like that. Okay? You're starting with the truth. Alright? You're not drowning in evidence. You're holding the truth that the court ignored. Alright? By identifying the core material facts, you transform the chaos into clarity. Okay? By building fraud packets, you turn trauma into structure. Okay? By organizing your case, you reclaim your voice. Alright? And that's how you begin. That is how you begin to take your power back. Alright? So anyway, one more time, the purpose of this video was to find your core material evidence with which you will build your fraud complaint, and a bit of a guideline on how to do that and how to structure it to give yourself a next step to work from. I just want to tell everybody thank you. If you have any questions, one more time, I just want you to know, get a hold of me or Adam through the group. Put a comment on this video, whatever you need to do. But if you have a question, please understand we're here and we're going to answer your questions to the best of our ability. Hope everybody has a good day.